An 80-year-old widow walked home alone on a freezing night after praying to Mother Mary for one small miracle, someone to ease her loneliness. She never expected the answer to cry out from a cardboard box. A tiny puppy, shaking and abandoned, looked up at her with pleading eyes. She wrapped him in her scarf, a fragile blessing placed into her arms. But God wasn't finished. From the shadows, a scarred German shepherd mother stepped forward, strong, loyal, unbroken. She had been searching for her puppy, and now she chose to protect the woman who saved him. Sometimes, miracles arrive on four paws. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe and share. Winter settled over Cedar Falls with a hushed and icy breath, turning rooftops silver and making every street lamp glow like a lonely candle struggling against the cold. Inside this quiet town lived Agnes Miller, an 80-year-old widow whose once strong frame had softened with age. Her white hair, thin as frost-spun lace, was always pinned neatly in a bun. She was petite, barely reaching 5 feet, but her presence still carried a quiet dignity engraved by long years of survival. Her pale blue eyes, though a little clouded by cataracts, held a softness that came from a lifetime of loving deeply and losing painfully. Agnes had lived in Cedar Falls for more than 20 years, in a tiny wood-sided house that sat behind a fence she painted sky blue every spring. Her husband, Arthur, had been a firefighter, the kind of man who ran toward flames when everyone else fled. Not long after his passing, silence became her fiercest enemy. It crept into every room, sat in Arthur's empty chair, and followed her to bed at night. And so, as the first Sunday of December arrived, Agnes bundled herself in a wool coat that seemed 2 sizes too big, pulled a scarf around her thin neck, and stepped out into the cold evening with her wooden cane tapping rhythmically, like a lone metronome in a deserted symphony. She walked to St. Bernadette's Church, a stone chapel standing proud at the top of Maple Hill. Its stained glass windows shimmered with images of saints and angels, casting warm halos across the snow. Inside the chapel, the world smelled faintly of incense and old wooden pews, a scent Agnes found comforting, like turning the pages of a beloved book. Father Raymond, the parish priest, greeted her at the entrance. He was in his late 60s, tall but stooped slightly from years of bending to listen to the whispered confessions of others. His hair was salt and pepper, beard neatly trimmed, and his eyes were kind, always kind. Agnes admired him for that. Some men carried authority like a hammer. He carried his like a warm blanket. "Evening, Mrs. Miller," he said softly. "Out in this chill again?" She smiled, her lips trembling slightly from the cold. "I go where comfort calls me, Father." He touched her shoulder gently and moved on to welcome another parishioner, leaving her to find her usual place. 3rd pew from the front, left side. Tonight, St. Bernadette's was nearly full. Families sat together bundled in jackets, children fidgeting with mittens, young couples leaning into each other. Agnes slid into her seat, realizing she was the only person sitting alone. Again. A familiar ache tugged at her chest, the kind of ache that never fully leaves, no matter how many years pass. She stared at the altar, where the statue of the Virgin Mary stood so gracefully, eyes carved to gaze downward as though embracing every sorrow of the world. The candles flickered below her feet, their flames dancing like tiny, hopeful souls. Agnes folded her hands, though they shook with age, and bowed her head. She didn't pray for herself often, She thought it selfish when so many others needed miracles far greater than hers. But tonight was different. Her voice quivered, barely a whisper. "Dear Mother Mary, I know I should be strong. I have been strong for so long. But this house, this empty chair, these quiet meals, they hurt. They hurt so much." Her eyes glistened, a soft dew forming. "I don't want diamonds or youth or health. I only don't want to face whatever days I have left completely alone. If you could send me someone small, someone in need, so I may care for them, so that we may care for each other. That would be enough. That would be more than enough." A tear slid down her wrinkled cheek, but she didn't wipe it. Pain deserved its moment too. The choir began to sing softly, a hymn of hope and rebirth. Agnes listened with her eyes closed, letting the melody fold around her like a warm quilt. She used to sing with them decades ago before her lungs tired too easily, before grief stole her voice. When the final candlelight prayer ended, parishioners gathered their coats and hurried into the cold. Agnes took her time. Her bones didn't respond well to rushing. And besides, what waited for her at home was just silence in a different shape. She stepped outside, cane tapping against the icy walkway. Snowflakes drifted slowly, settling onto her coat sleeves like tiny blessings. She paused at the bottom of the church steps and sighed, breath forming a fragile cloud in the night air. For a brief moment, she wondered if heaven ever truly listened, if prayers could still reach the ears of saints, if a lonely woman's whisper could matter. But then something unusual happened. A wind brushed past her that wasn't cold. A soft warmth grazed her cheek, like a hand smoothing away sorrow. She stopped walking. Agnes looked up at the sky. The clouds parted just enough for a single bright star to gleam above St. Bernadette's roof, glimmering, shimmering, impossibly vivid. She didn't know what it meant. She only knew her heart fluttered in a way she hadn't felt since Arthur first held her hand 58 years ago. She smiled at the sky. "Thank you for listening," she whispered. Then she tightened her scarf and started her slow journey home, unaware that just a few blocks away, hidden in the cold shadows of a grocery store parking lot, a pair of small, trembling eyes were waiting, and her miracle had already begun. Agnes Miller's cane tapped steadily against the quiet sidewalk as she made her careful journey home, the night air sharp and silver. Her earlier prayer still hovered in her heart, like a warm ember fighting against the cold. She wasn't sure if she had been heard, but the faint glow of hope in her chest made her steps a little lighter than they had been in years. As she neared the entrance to the Cedar Falls Market, its neon sign flickering as though it too was shivering, Agnes slowed. Something small and desperate cut through the silence, a sound like the cry of a frightened soul. "Help!" it seemed to plead, in the soft universal language of the weak. Agnes's breath stilled. She listened again. A short, sharp whimper. She followed the sound around the corner toward the store's delivery alley, where towering metal dumpsters cast long, jagged shadows across the ground. The scent of cold cardboard and discarded produce lingered in the air. There, nestled inside a dented cardboard box damp with melted snow, was a tiny bundle of fur. A puppy. Barely the size of her purse. Its fur was a patchy mix of warm cream and light brown shades, though currently soaked and clinging to its trembling body. Its eyes, huge, black, and glistening, stared up at her with the raw innocence of a newborn star afraid of the dark world it had been thrown into. Agnes's heart clenched painfully. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, crouching slowly until her knees protested. She reached out with careful hands to lift the puppy, surprised at how feather-light it was. The little creature whimpered again, burrowing into her coat with blind trust, as though it already knew she was its only chance. Agnes glanced inside the box one more time. Beside the puppy lay an empty can of cheap dog food and a torn grocery bag, but no blanket, no tag, no note, no sign that anyone had ever truly cared. "Left here like trash," she murmured, and the way she said the word trash tasted like bitterness. She wrapped her scarf tighter around the pup, shielding it from the wind. "You poor little thing. Well, I suppose tonight we're two lonely souls who found each other." A sudden gust of wind sent snow swirling around her boots, urging her to move. She rose, the puppy still tucked safely against her chest. The warmth of its tiny heartbeat fluttered against her ribs, like the ticking of a fragile clock reminding her that life was still happening, still choosing her. As she stepped back into the streetlight glow, a figure emerged from the convenience store door. A young man, perhaps in his late 20s, tall and lanky with scruffy blonde hair that curled over his forehead. His name tag read Ethan, a part-time clerk often seen stacking shelves with earbuds in. His long face was friendly, but tired, like someone who worked too late for too little pay. When he spotted Agnes holding the bundled pup, his eyes widened. "Whoa, where'd that little guy come from?" His voice was curious, not mocking, which made Agnes relax a little. "Someone left him behind the store," she replied, rubbing the puppy gently. Ethan's mouth tightened, irritation flickering across his features. "People can be awful," he muttered. He rubbed his hands together, breath fogging in the air. "The shelter closed early tonight. They've been short-staffed all week. You planning on keeping him?" Agnes looked down at the puppy pressing its head weakly beneath her chin. The question seemed strange, almost too soon to comprehend. But yet, in her heart, the answer had already taken root. "I think he might be keeping me." Ethan smiled faintly, a small encouragement in a world that rarely offered her one. "Be careful," he said softly. "Things this little can change your whole life." Agnes nodded. "Maybe that's exactly what I need." She thanked him and continued toward home, the silent puppy breathing small clouds of warmth into her coat. Her house welcomed her with a low squeal of the front gate and a porch light that flickered twice before deciding to stay lit. She hurried inside, closing the cold out behind her. The familiar quiet greeted her, once oppressive, now simply waiting. Agnes set the puppy inside a woven laundry basket beside the old wood stove, laying one of her softest knit blankets inside. The stove crackled gently as she nudged a log into the fire. Within moments, the little creature's trembling eased, its body relaxing in the glow of heat. Only then did Agnes fully see it. The puppy's ears too big for its head, one flopping sideways like a tiny flag of surrender, and its nose perfectly heart-shaped. "You are adorable," she whispered, as though afraid any louder might frighten the happiness rising in her chest. The puppy blinked up at her with grateful, half-closed eyes, and its tail, thin and awkward, gave a single, hopeful wag. "Hope," she decided aloud. "That is what you are. Hope." The name felt right. It felt promised. She prepared a small bowl of warm milk and set it beside him. Hope lapped clumsily, his tiny tongue splashing more milk onto his nose than into his mouth. Agnes chuckled, a soft sound that surprised even herself. When Hope finished, he waddled unsteadily toward her, paws clicking lightly on the wooden floor. Without hesitation, he curled up against the foot of her armchair and gave a little sigh, the kind of sigh that comes from knowing you are finally safe. Agnes reached down and stroked his soft head. "You're home now," she whispered. "You're home, my little Hope." And as the night deepened outside and the wind howled like ghosts searching for warmth, Agnes realized that for the first time in a very long while, silence wasn't loneliness anymore. It was peace. Dawn crept quietly over Cedar Falls, painting the snow in soft pink hues, as if the sky itself blushed at seeing the world wake up. Inside the little wooden house, Hope slept curled like a warm comma against Agnes Miller's ankle. Agnes woke slowly, the stiffness in her joints reminding her that age never forgot its duties. But today, there was something different, something small and alive breathing against her, a companion. She smiled before her mind fully caught up. Carefully, she reached down to stroke Hope's soft cream fur. His tail thumped once against the knitted blanket, and he stretched, letting out a squeaky yawn that seemed too tiny for the world. "Good morning, little one," Agnes whispered. "Are you hungry?" The answer came in the form of Hope attempting to chew on her slipper. As Agnes shuffled into the kitchen, cane tapping a slow rhythm, the house felt less empty. The morning light filtered in through lace curtains as she prepared a small dish of softened puppy food. Hope devoured it with the enthusiasm of a hero returning from battle. Tiny paws splayed, ears wobbling with every determined crunch. While he ate, Agnes walked to the front window to draw the curtains, and froze. Tiny paw prints dotted the snow-covered porch. Not Hope's. These tracks were bigger, deeper, spaced with confident, purposeful strides. A dog. Full grown. Agnes looked beyond the fence to the street, scanning the silent morning. Something, or someone, had been very close while she slept. Her heart fluttered uneasily. "Someone's looking for you," she murmured to Hope, who was now licking his bowl clean as though he had never eaten in his life. Agnes moved to lock the door, suddenly aware of how fragile she was, an elderly woman with only a puppy to guard her. Yet, when she looked again at the tracks, they did not feel like a threat. They felt like longing carved into snow. She shook off the feeling and decided fresh air would soothe her nerves. She placed Hope into a small knitted tote bag she had once used for groceries. He poked his head out, ears perked, black button eyes studying the world as if all of existence had been made just for him. Agnes bundled herself in her oversized coat and stepped outside. The cold nipped at her cheeks, but the morning sun softened the bite. Across the street, Mrs. Helen Carter waved from her porch. A woman in her 70s with tightly curled gray hair and round glasses. She had a gossip-loving heart, but meant well. Her floral robe, far too thin for winter, fluttered as she leaned forward eagerly. "Agnes! Good heavens, what's that you have there?" Agnes gave a shy smile as Mrs. Carter hurried over, slippers skidding slightly on the icy walkway. "A friend?" Agnes answered. "I found him last night," Mrs. Carter cooed dramatically. "A puppy! Oh, what a darling little face!" She reached to pet Hope, who sniffed her fingers before licking them politely. "Looks like you finally have some company." she chuckled. About time, dear. Agnes blushed at the remark. Gentle truth often stung. Mrs. Carter continued chattering about her daughter visiting for Christmas and a TV recipe she had tried. But Agnes's attention drifted. Something, a prickle of awareness, pulled her gaze toward the tree line across the road. There, half hidden by a snow-laden pine, stood a figure. A dog. A large German shepherd, its coat a proud blend of deep sable and golden brown, though now dulled with dirt and winter wear. Its pointed ears were erect, alert, while its dark, intelligent eyes remained locked onto Hope with fierce intensity. Not aggression, but yearning. Even from a distance, the dog's build spoke of strength forged by training. Muscles visible beneath the fur, a stance ready to move at the slightest sign. A fighter, a survivor. Hope wriggled inside the tote, letting out a soft "umph," as if recognizing something deeper than memory, something instinctual. The shepherd lowered its head slightly, body leaning forward, but paws rooted to the earth, frozen stance of a mother afraid to hope. Agnes inhaled sharply, her voice a brittle whisper. You... Mrs. Carter squinted in the same direction, but the shepherd stepped back into the trees, disappearing like a shadow in daylight. Stray dogs again? Mrs. Carter huffed, unaware of the significance. Animal control should do something. But Agnes wasn't thinking of animal control. She was thinking of the tracks on her porch, the long night this dog must have endured, the empty cardboard box where Hope had been. Hope placed there by human cruelty, not by nature. Hope whimpered softly, as though calling out into the distance. Agnes pressed a hand over his tiny body, trying to calm him and herself. He has a family, she whispered, not to Mrs. Carter but to the wind, and she's looking for him. The thought tore her heart in two, half joy, half fear. Joy for the reunion needed, fear of the loneliness that might return in its place. Mrs. Carter excused herself to fetch a coat, leaving Agnes alone with her thoughts. She stood there, clutching her tote like a shield, staring at the trees long after the shepherd had vanished. Hope rested his chin on the edge of the bag, eyes glimmering as though he understood the storm brewing in her chest. Agnes took a deep breath and gave a small nod, making a promise she wasn't ready to say aloud. If she comes back, I'll do the right thing. But when she turned, she noticed something half buried in the snow near her porch steps, something she hadn't seen before. A torn leather collar. Attached to it, a metal tag scratched almost beyond recognition. Only a faint word remained beneath the wear. Grace. A name. Agnes held the collar tightly against her chest. Hope whined and nuzzled her hand, and as wind rustled the pines, she knew Grace would return. Evening crept into Cedar Falls with a quiet unease, the sky turning lavender before surrendering to the deep blue of night. Agnes Miller double-checked every window latch and door lock, something she hadn't bothered with in years. The world felt bigger now that her home held a treasure someone else might desperately want. Hope. The tiny puppy snoozed in her armchair, belly full and dreams warm. He occasionally twitched a paw or squeaked, chasing invisible butterflies, or maybe the memory of a mother's heartbeat. Agnes sat nearby, her fingers gently folding and unfolding the worn leather dog collar she found earlier. The name Grace, scratched into the tag, had left a mark deeper than metal, carved now into Agnes's thoughts. She tried telling herself it was simple. Reunite mother and child, and loneliness returns to its throne. But another truth whispered just as loud. She didn't want to be alone again. A sudden knock startled her so much that the collar slipped from her trembling hand. Rarely, if ever, did she receive visitors after sunset. Her heart fluttered like a trapped sparrow beneath her ribs. She stood slowly, cane tapping a hesitant rhythm as she approached the door. Before she could ask who was there, a calm voice carried through the wood, firm but gentle. "Ma'am, sorry to bother you. I'm Officer Daniel Hayes, Cedar Falls Police Department. Just hoping to ask a few questions." Agnes cracked the door open, leaving the chain latched. On the porch stood a police officer, tall and broad-shouldered with a clean navy uniform that fit like it was tailored for him alone. Officer Hayes looked to be in his late 30s. His square jaw was darkened with end-of-day stubble, and his dark brown hair was kept short beneath his cap. His eyes were a deep forest green, sharp yet exhausted in a way that suggested the world had demanded too much of him for too long. He carried himself with discipline and calm authority, but his posture, one shoulder dipping slightly, hinted at an old injury. Agnes wondered what kind of story lived in that scar hidden beneath the uniform. Yes?" she managed, gripping the edge of the door. "Is something wrong?" Officer Hayes removed his cap politely. "We got a call this morning. Someone reported a stray German shepherd around this area. Bigger dog, looks like she's been living rough. We've had a few sightings recently." Agnes's grip on the collar tightened behind the door. She swallowed. "I may have seen something earlier." The officer nodded thoughtfully. "She may be dangerous or scared. Sometimes those are the same thing." His words carried empathy, not fear, like a man who had known both sides of survival. "If you see her again, call us. We just want to keep the neighborhood safe." As he spoke, Hope let out a tiny sneeze from inside the living room. Officer Hayes raised a brow. "Is that a puppy?" Agnes's protective instinct surged. She opened the door only, wide enough to slip through and block his view. Friend. I found him behind Cedar Falls Market. Poor thing was freezing." Hayes's expression softened. "Good you were there. The shelter's been overwhelmed. Holiday season tends to bring out the best in people, and sometimes the worst." He paused, then added quietly, "I used to be K-9 unit, a long time ago." His eyes drifted toward the snow-covered trees, something dark passing behind his gaze. "My partner, her name was Lily. Smartest dog I ever knew. Better instincts than any human. Saved my life once. But a suspect shot her during a raid. She made it, for a while, but she never walked the same again." He sighed, voice catching like old fabric snagged on a nail. "I couldn't protect her. Haven't handled a K-9 since." Agnes felt a stab of empathy, not pity, for this stiff-spined soldier of the streets who carried ghosts quietly. Officer Hayes put his hat back on. "If that shepherd comes back, she could be a threat, or she could be looking for something she lost. Either way, don't go near her alone. Call me." He handed her a business card. Agnes nodded, heart beating too fast. "Thank you, officer." He tipped his cap respectfully and walked back toward his patrol car. The taillights glowed red before fading into the night. Agnes shut the door, locking it tightly. Her hands shook as she pressed her back against the wood. A threat or a mother, fear or longing, safety or love. Hope's tiny paws pattered across the floor as he came to sit by her feet. staring up with eyes that believed she could fix every broken thing. "Oh, my sweet boy." Agnes brushed his fur. "What am I supposed to do when your mother arrives?" As if in answer, a soft thud hit the porch. Agnes froze. Hope's ears perked, his entire being suddenly alert. Slowly, Agnes peered through the small window beside the door. The darkness stared back, until two glowing amber eyes emerged from it. Grace. The German shepherd stepped forward into the porch light, her fur dusted with snow, ribs faintly visible beneath her coat, strength and hunger holding each other in balance. She sat, proud, silent, waiting. Hope barked, not scared but recognizing the call of blood. Agnes opened the door, hands shaking like withered leaves. She stepped out into the cold, standing face to face with the mother of the tiny miracle inside her home. Grace lowered her head, not submission, but pleading. Her breath fogged the air between them. Her eyes said every word her voice could not. "He is mine." Agnes's voice trembled, not from cold. "I know." Hope pressed his nose between Agnes's hands, tail whipping wildly. The choice she feared was no longer looming in the future. It stood right in front of her, staring into her soul. In that moment, Agnes understood that a miracle from heaven sometimes arrives carrying two hearts, and loving one means risking the loss of the other. Grace did not move. She sat perfectly still on the porch, as if carved from the night itself. Snowflakes clung to the dark ridges of her fur, melting slowly against the warmth of a body that had survived far too many cold nights alone. Agnes Miller clutched Hope protectively to her chest. The little pup squirmed with excitement, his tiny tail thumping wildly, unaware of the storm inside Agnes's heart. Her breath came out uneven and unsure. She could feel Grace's gaze like a gentle hand pressing firmly over her fears. The German shepherd lowered her head a fraction, not in threat, but in a plea older than language. Agnes swallowed and stepped back inside. Hope let out a soft cry when the door closed between him and his mother. Agnes turned the lock with shaking fingers, staring at her own reflection in the glass pane. She looked older than she had yesterday, perhaps because love had returned to her life too quickly and now threatened to vanish again. Hope whined and pawed at the door. Agnes gathered him closer. "I know, darling," she whispered, her voice cracking, "but I can't lose you, not yet." A deep, low huff came from outside. Grace had pressed her nose against the doorframe, breathing Hope's scent through the crack. Agnes stood frozen. She knew Grace wasn't aggressive. Every movement the dog made was tempered with restraint, dignity, and an unspoken vow to protect. Still, years of living alone had taught Agnes caution. Letting anyone in, human or canine, was a risk she had forgotten how to take. Hope wriggled free and darted to the window. His tiny paws beat a frantic rhythm against the sill. Grace rose to her feet, ears forward. A soft whine passed between mother and child, notes of longing that pierced deeper than any howl. Agnes's heart kept breaking open, piece by piece. She could not deny what she saw. Grace was not a stray. She was a soldier, a guardian, a mother. The collar Agnes found earlier lay on the table. Her fingers traced the engraved name again. Grace. She approached the door, despite her fears, and unlatched the lock. Grace did not push her way in. She stepped back politely, giving Agnes space to decide. It was this gentleness that undid her. Agnes opened the door fully. Grace entered with slow, quiet steps, inhaling the scent of her pup like a blessing. Hope squealed with joy, launching himself into Grace's chest. The reunion was silent but powerful, their heads pressed together, tails brushing like soft whispers of forgiveness and relief. Agnes blinked tears away. She gave them a moment, and then carefully knelt beside Grace, her knees aching, but her spirit oddly strong. Grace turned to her, eyes meeting hers. They were not the eyes of a feral stray. They held memory, training, purpose. Agnes brushed aside fur to reveal a scar across Grace's left shoulder, a long, healed but unmistakable wound. Not a street injury, something caused by violence. "You've served someone before," Agnes murmured. "Someone who didn't stay to serve you." Grace sat politely as Agnes inspected the worn leather collar around her neck. The metal clasp was broken. It had once been removed with force, not lost. There were faded imprints where other tags had been. A missing identity. A stolen life. Agnes ran her thumb gently along Grace's jaw. "You were trained to protect, and they still left you." Grace responded by nudging her palm with her nose, a gesture of reassurance flipping their roles. She was the one comforting Agnes. A soft knock disrupted the quiet. Agnes jolted. Hope barked his tiny bark. Grace rose instantly, body rigid, ears pricked. Agnes crept to the window. It wasn't Officer Hayes. Instead, a woman stood on the porch, a stranger. She appeared to be in her late 30s or early 40s, wrapped in a thick navy coat with a fur-lined hood. Her dark hair grazed her shoulders, sleek and well-kept. Her face had the kind of beauty built from symmetry, but there was a brittleness in her stiff jaw and narrowed eyes that made Agnes uneasy. The woman knocked again, more forcefully this time. Agnes cracked the door open, but kept her foot behind it as a barrier. "Can I help you?" she asked carefully. The woman's eyes darted past Agnes into the house. "Yes," she replied curtly. "I'm looking for a lost puppy, cream-colored, about 6 weeks old." Agnes felt Hope's warm body brush her ankle. Grace stepped forward, placing herself between Agnes and the stranger, muscle and instinct shielding them. The woman frowned at the sight of the shepherd. "That dog, she bit my husband last week. He had to get a tetanus shot. Animal control has been trying to find her." Agnes's stomach twisted. The woman continued, voice sharpened by irritation more than concern. "Return the puppy. He belongs with us." Agnes immediately sensed the lie. Cruelty had a smell, sharp and dishonest. Hope flinched behind Grace's leg, sensing danger. Agnes's voice steadied, surprising herself. "Do you have proof he's yours?" The woman stiffened. Her lips pinched together. Grace's growl rumbled low, not loud, but enough to make the woman pale. Without another word, the stranger retreated with angry steps, her boots crunching ice like bones beneath her feet. Agnes closed the door, chest trembling. Grace kept staring through the window, ensuring the threat left fully. Hope climbed into Agnes's lap, seeking safety. Agnes held him close and whispered into his soft fur, "You're not going anywhere." Grace lay at their feet, a silent vow in her posture. No one will take him again. Agnes reached down and stroked Grace's head. "You protect us. We protect you." Their little family had formed, not through blood or law, but through the wounds each was healing in the other. Outside, the wind howled against the door, Inside, 3 hearts beat as one. That night, sleep refused to visit Agnes Miller. The shadows in her small wooden house felt different now, no longer empty, but charged with the tension of a guardian lying in wait. Grace positioned herself directly in front of the door, her massive paws stretched forward, ears pricked for any threat. Hope, blissfully naive, slept curled against Agnes's ribcage, his soft breaths resting like tiny prayers over her heart. Agnes kept replaying the encounter with the strange woman. Something in the woman's eyes, sharp like chipped glass, had warned her that the danger was not over. Cruelty often returned when denied its prize. Agnes had been helpless many times in her life. When Arthur died, when her hands began to tremble more than they should, when silence almost swallowed her whole. But tonight, she was not helpless. She had a protector with scars as proof of battles survived, and a puppy who needed her to be stronger than her fears. "We're a family now," she whispered, stroking Hope's fur. Grace turned her head slightly, acknowledging the vow with her steady amber gaze. Morning arrived slowly, carrying the metallic scent of approaching snowstorm. Agnes warmed leftover oatmeal on the stove. Hope ate first, his manners non-existent, and Grace waited patiently until Agnes set down a bowl of kibble she had hastily ordered from her pantry. Grace ate with restrained hunger, as though she believed any excess would be punished. The sight tightened Agnes's heart. After breakfast, Agnes bundled herself in her old green coat and stepped outside. Grace followed without being asked, her body always angled slightly toward Agnes and Hope, like a shield that moved when they did. The world beyond the doorstep looked harmless. Children's sled tracks across the park, distant church bells chiming, Mrs. Carter waving a gloved hand from her porch. But Agnes wasn't fooled. Goodness lived here, but danger now stalked its borders. She decided to seek help from someone who understood animals more than paperwork. The veterinarian clinic was 3 blocks away, marked by a hand-painted sign with a smiling cartoon cat wearing a stethoscope. Inside, the scent of antiseptic and wet fur mixed together in a strangely comforting aroma. A woman stood behind the counter, mid-50s, short and round with cinnamon-colored hair pinned into a generous bun. Her cheeks were rosy and her hazel eyes shined with dependable warmth. Her name tag read, Dr. Lillian Brooks. "Well, aren't you 3 just the cutest parade?" she said, voice soft and cheerfully melodic. Agnes managed a small smile. "I found them, and I think they've found me." Dr. Brooks leaned over the counter to examine Hope's eyes and grin. "A healthy little boy," she noted. "Terrible haircut, though," she added jokingly, pointing at his awkward ears, and the pup sneezed indignantly. Grace stepped between the vet and the puppy, not aggressively, but with calm, protective intent. Dr. Brooks raised her hands. "Oh, I see who's in charge here," she chuckled. Her gaze sharpened slightly, noticing Grace's scars, her lean frame, the old military-style collar Agnes showed her. "She's seen work," Dr. Brooks murmured with respect. "A K-9, no doubt. They don't abandon their duty. Ever." Agnes felt a shiver, not of fear, but awe, run down her spine. "Do you think someone will come for her?" "Someone should have never let her go," Brooks replied, expression firm. "A dog like her isn't unwanted. She's irreplaceable." Then her voice dropped lower. "But there are people who discard loyalty when it's no longer convenient. I've seen too many animals dumped with excuses colder than snow." Agnes felt seen, more deeply than she could admit. Dr. Brooks examined Grace gently, checking healed bruises and the split collar. She'll need rest, patience, and love, and security. Agnes nodded. She suddenly remembered Officer Hayes's business card in her coat pocket. She hesitated. Should I call the police? Dr. Brooks read the conflict in her eyes. Call them if danger comes knocking. But for now, this dog trusts you. That's powerful medicine. On the walk home, snow began falling heavily, turning the world white and soft, except for Agnes's fear, which sharpened like a knife. Grace stopped abruptly halfway home, lowering her muzzle to the ground. Footprints. Someone had been near their house. Fresh ones. Agnes's pulse hammered in her ears. She tightened her hold on Hope and hurried inside. She turned the deadbolt. Then she turned another lock she hadn't used in years. Grace paced the front door like a silent storm. Agnes moved through the house with sudden urgency, pushing a chair against the back door, sliding the coffee table in front of the kitchen entrance. The house, once gentle and open, now rearranged itself into a fortress under her trembling hands. Hope watched with innocent curiosity, trotting after her as though the game excited him. Grace stayed vigilant, head high, tail straight, listening for movement beyond the walls. Agnes sank into her armchair when everything was finally barricaded. Her breath shook with the weight of fear and purpose fused together. Grace walked over and rested her enormous head on Agnes's lap, a gesture of alliance. Hope crawled on top of Grace's neck and fell asleep like a baby bird trusting the branch beneath him. Agnes stroked both of them at once. "You protect us," she whispered, "and I'll do everything to protect you." Grace lifted her head, eyes fierce and loyal. Hope sighed in his sleep, and Agnes realized something astonishing. She was not frightened anymore. The storm outside unleashed its fury against the windows, but 3 hearts inside beat firmly and together. A house with love was no longer fragile. It was a fortress built by miracles. The storm thickened over Cedar Falls as if winter itself wished to erase all traces of footsteps and fear. Wind battered the windows, rattling old frames like impatient fists demanding entry. Despite the chaos outside, the house held its ground, fortified not only by furniture, but by love and loyalty newly sworn. Agnes Miller sat in her armchair, wrapped in her faded pink blanket. She looked so small there, an elderly woman with silver hair in a bun that had loosened through the day, wisps falling along her soft cheeks. But in her eyes, something resolute had sparked. Hope lay curled on her lap, belly rising and falling with effortless trust. Grace rested directly in front of the door, her massive frame a wall of fur and muscle. Her ears twitched with every gust of wind, every shift in the air's rhythm. She was a shield forged from devotion and experience, scars marking where previous battles had tried and failed to put out the fire inside her. Agnes's fingers traced Hope's tiny spine gently. "We're safe," she whispered, though part of her wondered if she spoke to convince them or herself. It was nearly midnight when Grace suddenly rose, silent as a shadow. Her nose tilted upward, inhaling a scent that sliced through all distractions. The shift in her stance, from resting to battle-ready, sent a bolt of fear crackling through Agnes's chest. "Is someone out there?" Agnes whispered. The puppy lifted his tiny head, ears floppy but alert, let out a low, confused whine. Grace moved toward the window. Her tail stiffened, the fur along her back rising in a dark ridge. Agnes forced herself up, leaning heavily on her cane. Her bones protested, but she pushed forward anyway. She peered through the edge of the curtains. A dark truck idled at the edge of her driveway. No headlights, engine humming low like a predator's growl. Agnes's breath hitched. The driver's door opened. A thick-set man in his late 40s stepped out. He was broad-shouldered and tall, wrapped in a dark coat that didn't hide his heavy build. His jaw was square and unshaven, stubble covering his skin like sandpaper. His eyes were mean, narrow, with a perpetual crease in his brow signaling a life lived in anger. His limp on the right leg revealed either an old injury or a temper that once drove him into violence. His name would soon be known as Bill Carter, husband of the cold woman who'd come earlier, though his last name didn't match hers because control to him meant she belonged to him, not the reverse. He slammed the door of his truck quietly but forcefully. Grace growled, a low thunder that vibrated through the floorboards. Bill Carter scanned the house like a hunter who knew his prey. He moved toward the porch, shoulders rolling like a man who settled disputes with fists before words. Agnes's knees buckled with panic. "Oh, dear God," she whispered. Without hesitation, Grace placed her body between Agnes and the door. Hope barked, tiny but fierce, as if courage could be contagious. Bill tried the doorknob first. Locked. He grunted. Then he pounded the door once, hard, making the house tremble. "Open up!" His voice was coarse, soaked in threat. Agnes backed away, heart slamming painfully against her ribs. Grace remained unmoving, staring at the wood as though she could burn holes through it. Bill cursed under his breath, scanning the windows for weaknesses. The storm masked his footsteps as he made his way around to the back. Agnes shakily pulled the business card from her coat pocket. Officer Daniel Hayes. Her hands trembled so violently, she almost dropped her phone as she dialed. It rang once. Twice. Cedar Falls Police, Hayes speaking. His voice was calm, but Agnes heard the shift instantly when she whispered, "Officer Hayes, someone's here." "Stay inside," he instructed sharply, all softness gone. "I'm on my way." Bill Carter was now at the back, rattling the handle, testing the chair Agnes had shoved against it earlier. Grace rushed there instantly, teeth bared, a growl rolling from deep within her chest like a warning from a long-buried war. Agnes clutched Hope close to her heart. "Please protect us," she breathed. Not to God this time, but to the brave creature who refused to budge. Just as Bill prepared to ram his shoulder into the door, the distant scream of sirens cut through the howling wind. Hayes must have been close already, or he'd decided that her voice alone was enough to break all speed limits. Bill cursed and dashed back toward his truck, but his limp slowed him. Blue and red lights flickered through the snow like salvation descending from the heavens. The truck peeled away, tires spinning uselessly for a moment on the icy road before finding traction and disappearing into the blizzard. Grace didn't relax, not even when the sirens stopped in front of the house and Officer Hayes sprinted through the snow toward the porch. He slammed his fist against the door, but this time Agnes knew it was a friend. She allowed herself to unlock the door. Hayes stepped inside, snow clinging to his shoulders, his breath sharp with adrenaline. He scanned the room, then exhaled heavily when he saw she was unharmed. "You did the right thing," he said, voice strained. He knelt to Grace's level. "And you, good girl, you kept them safe." Grace accepted the praise with quiet dignity. Agnes couldn't speak yet. She simply held Hope, who was shaking now, not from cold, but from the fading echo of fear. Hayes stood and placed a reassuring hand on Agnes's shoulder. You're not alone. I'm here." Agnes nodded slowly, still trembling. Behind her, Grace moved closer, pressing her solid weight against Agnes's leg, grounding her back into life. Hope reached up and nudged Grace's chin, his tiny body seeking comfort in fur and heartbeat. 3 souls, 1 bond, 1 battle survived, and outside, storm winds howled in defeat. Morning arrived slowly, as though even the sun wanted to be cautious after the terror of the night before. Snow lay thick across Cedar Falls, a soft white quilt smoothing over the tracks of danger and fear. Inside the little wooden house, warmth spread like the presence of something holy, a miracle that had not only arrived, but decided to stay. Agnes Miller awoke to the soft weight of hope sleeping against her ribs, and the confident shape of Grace curled near the doorway, one eye open, watching even in her rest. Agnes smiled, and for the first time in a very long time, the smile held no trace of loneliness. The door opened gently as Officer Daniel Hayes stepped inside, having remained nearby all night. Snowflakes clung to his uniform, and his breath fogged lightly as he removed his gloves. His face, square jaw and forest green eyes, looked deeply tired but also calm, as if he had chosen to be their guardian long before being asked. "Good morning," he said, voice softer than she expected from someone who carried grief like a shadow behind his ribs. Agnes attempted to rise, but her joints protested. Hayes moved quickly to help her sit up straighter, his hands gentle and respectful. "I owe you everything," Agnes whispered. Hayes shook his head. "You owe me nothing. Grace did the hard work. She's a hero." Grace blinked at him, ears perked, but remained still, alert as always. Hope wiggled free from Agnes's blanket and toddled toward Hayes, clumsy paws skittering on the wooden floor. Hayes knelt to scratch behind his ear. "And you," he murmured with a smile, "are trouble shaped like hope." Agnes chuckled softly. The laughter felt like music finally set free after years locked in silence. A knock on the door startled them all, but Hayes was already standing, hand resting on the holster at his hip. Agnes tensed until a familiar voice called from outside. "It's just me, dears!" Mrs. Helen Carter entered with the force of a small hurricane wrapped in a floral coat, cheeks rosy from the cold. Behind her stumbled a lanky teenage boy, her grandson, Evan Carter, a 16-year-old with unruly brown curls, tall limbs he hadn't grown into yet, and a shy, apologetic expression. Evan's face flushed beneath freckles when he saw Grace eyeing him like a drill sergeant. "Easy, sweetheart," Mrs. Carter told Grace, patting the air in her direction. "This one's harmless. He's never so much as raised his voice at a fly." Evan scratched his neck awkwardly, confirming the truth of that. Mrs. Carter set down a basket stuffed with fresh muffins, bandages, and dog treats. "I heard what happened," she said, voice trembling slightly with both anger and pride. "You're already local legends, the talk of every heart in town." Hayes exhaled, relieved by the normalcy she brought in with her whirlwind presence. Still, Agnes noticed something thoughtful in his gaze, like he was already planning their protection long after the home storm faded. Evan knelt shyly beside Grace, offering a treat. Grace sniffed, accepted, then planted her large head gently against his chest in approval. The boy lit up in quiet joy. Agnes swore she saw a new defender being made before her eyes. Later that day, Hayes returned with news. Bill Carter had been arrested during a police stop outside town. His injuries from the night chase made him easier to catch. The strange woman, Bill's partner, was also taken into custody. They had stolen dogs before, selling puppies for profit, abandoning mothers like Grace afterward. "They won't hurt anyone again," Hayes promised. Agnes sagged with relief, tears slipping free. Not from fear this time, but release, freedom, gratitude. Hayes remained, helping repair the back door where Bill had tried to break in. He moved with strength and careful precision, occasionally wincing from his old shoulder injury. Grace sat nearby, supervising with a veteran's scrutiny. "You're quite the team," Agnes said warmly. Hayes paused, looking at the dog with tenderness he rarely showed to people. "I miss working with dogs," he confessed quietly. "Since Lily died, I didn't think I could ever do this again." Grace stepped forward, pressing her forehead against his leg with deliberate trust. Hayes swallowed hard, one hand resting on her head, the memory of pain finally meeting the possibility of healing. "Maybe it's time to try," Agnes encouraged. He nodded slowly. "Maybe it is." When repairs finished, Hayes stood with a look that was half duty, half heart. He cleared his throat. "I'll be stopping by, regularly, for safety checks." Agnes smiled knowingly. For safety checks, of course. Evening cast golden light into the home as the storm clouds broke apart, revealing a calming sky. Agnes lit a single candle and set it beneath her small statue of the Virgin Mary in the garden, a ritual she had done for years with a heart heavy in prayers unanswered. But tonight, the candle's flame flickered not from wind, but from joy. Standing beside her were Hope and Grace, Hope with his clumsy paws and endless admiration, Grace with her scarred strength and unbreakable loyalty. Agnes's eyes glistened, a whisper of gratitude escaping her lips. "Thank you, Mother Mary. You heard me." Grace nudged her palm. Hope climbed onto her shoe, tail whipping like a flag of triumph. They watched the candle glow brighter with each breath. Behind them, Hayes lingered at the gate, hands in his pockets, watching the little family with the same reverence one reserves for holy things. The world was still dangerous, but inside these three hearts, light had claimed its victory. And Agnes, once fearful of the days she had left, now held the future gently, like a puppy sleeping in her lap, trusting her to carry hope forward. In this world, we all face nights of fear, storms that come without warning, and moments when we feel like we are walking home alone. But sometimes, if we dare to keep believing, God places miracles right in front of us. Sometimes that miracle has 4 paws, soft fur, and loyalty stronger than any darkness. Just like Grace and little Hope, heaven can send help in the simplest forms: a friend, a neighbor, a smile, a prayer whispered in the quiet. If this story touched your heart today, please share it with someone who might need a reminder that God is still working, still healing, and still answering prayers in ways we do not always expect. Leave a comment telling us where your miracles have come from. And make sure you subscribe so together we can keep spreading faith, kindness, and the proof that love never gives up. May God bless you, protect you, and wrap His angels around your home, just as He did for Agnes, Grace, and Hope. Amen.